What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports, the first YouTube episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. Today, I will be getting into some F1 fantasy with a 2023 Saudi Arabia Grand Prix preview. Week early because I'm going on vacation next week, but I did want to get this out and start doing video episodes for the F1 fantasy season with the game having some new rules. My second season doing this, so wanted to get right into it. So let's take a look at the Bahrain Grand Prix with a review here. Qualifying was kind of what we expected with Max, Sergio, Charles, and Carlos as the top four. That was the same top four as we had in Abu Dhabi to end last year's season. But fifth was Fernando Alonso as he kind of showed what that Aston Martin car can do ahead of George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Lance Stroll going through the wrist injuries, getting in there in the top 10 into Q3. Esteban Ocon had a promising Saturday, not as much of a Sunday, which I'm sure we will get into. And then Nico Hülkenberg with his second straight year reaching Q3 in Bahrain after he stepped in for Sebastian Vettel at the start of the 2022 season because the German was dealing with COVID. But in his first race back with Haas, he gets into Q3. So that was a very encouraging Saturday for the American team. And then on Sunday, when the lights went out and away we went, it was not a super entertaining race at the front as Max kind of just stormed away. Sergio came second, but the story of the day is definitely what Fernando Alonso did as he fought through the field and got a podium for the first time in a couple of seasons for himself, and he became the second oldest driver in the last 37 years to finish on podium. The oldest one, Michael Schumacher. Next up, we had Carlos there. One of the Ferraris finished, Charles Leclerc DNFing. Very disappointing for the Italian guys in red last weekend. Then it was Lewis, Lance Stroll, George Russell, Valtteri Bottas sneaking into the top 10, Pierre Gasly with a phenomenal race, one of the Alpine guys going strong at least. And then in 10th, we had Alexander Albon. So that kind of rounded up the top 10 just from a racing perspective. But what about in fantasy? So these are from the F1fantasytracker.com website. Would highly suggest going there if you want to kind of just see race by race. It's a great, very user-friendly website. But driver of the day, Fernando Alonso, 39 points, actually beats Max Verstappen, who had 35 points himself. Perez, Gasly there in fourth was the surprise of the day, I would say, considering he was all the way at the back of the grid to start the race. He came through with 11 places gained, which was the most in the race, and then 7 overtakes, which was the second most. Hamilton there, Sainz, Lance Stroll, George Russell, Zhou Guanyu getting the fastest lap. So fantasy F1, different than real F1. He gets the extra points despite not finishing in the top 10. So good for him. And then Valtteri Bottas there with his 10th straight point scoring race in Bahrain. So good for the Finn. Next up, the bottom 10 here, but a great day for Alex Albon and Logan Sargent in his debut F1 race. Those guys both had 7 overtakes to match Pierre Gasly for the second most in the race. Then we had Tsunoda, De Vries, K-Mag, Hülkenberg dropped way down the race, unfortunately. Lando Norris, 6 pit stops, 6 places lost, ended up with a negative score. Charles Leclerc with minus 11 due to his DNF. Oscar Piastri, another DNF, and Esteban Ocon all the way down there with another DNF for himself. So overall, it's surprising to see Leclerc and Piastri down here and Ocon, but that McLaren car is not running well. So hopefully, I know a lot of people went with Leclerc to be a little bit different from the meta team that was put out there at the beginning of the season. And I know some people put the DRS boost on him as well, and that did not work out too well for them. On the constructor side, we've got Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, Ferrari, and then the rest down here. The surprising thing about the constructors was that Red Bull scored 79 points, but they didn't even have the fastest pit stops in the preseason episode for the F1 fantasy season. I was backing Red Bull to kind of dominate that category, but it was actually Ferrari that scored 13 of the 18 pit stop points available each race. So that's Red Bull without an extra 13 points. So they could be topping 90 points regularly if this car is as strong as it looked in Bahrain with the 1-2 finish, the 1-2 qualifying, and not getting the fastest pit stop points here. Like on a sprint weekend, Red Bull could be absolutely dominant. Alfa Romeo actually shows up here as well because they get the 10 fastest lap points as well that Zhou Guanyu picked up in that race. But a lot of teams have Red Bull and Aston Martin, and I think for the foreseeable future, as long as we are in the early stages of the season and Red Bull and Aston Martin Red Bull look as dominant as they are, and Aston Martin remain as good of a value as they currently are, those are the two constructors that you really want to get to if you want to be competitive in your mini leagues, in the overall, in the world standings. So definitely get those two in. Those would be the right up there in priority for myself. But another change to the F1 fantasy season is going to be that prices only change once a week. And this next guy here, his price went up. Fernando Alonso, just wanted to highlight what a special weekend he had. Started 5th on the grid, finished 3rd, 2 places gained, 6 overtakes, and 39 total fantasy points. I talked about it earlier, 2nd oldest driver at 41 years old in the last 37 years to finish on the podium. Michael Schumacher did it in the 2012 European Grand Prix in Valencia. And it was also the 2nd podium for Aston Martin in their 50th Grand Prix and the 99th overall podium for the Spaniard. So good job by him. Aston Martin were outstanding in the preseason. There was a lot of hype going into last weekend's race, and they kind of followed through with it. And he is now up 0.2 million in the game. If you don't have Fernando Alonso, he is right up there with Max Verstappen, Red Bull, and Aston Martin as must-haves in the game. But the fun stuff now, price changes. Last year, it was dynamic pricing. So it was floating all over the place each and every day. You really had to be on top of the game. But now F1 has decided to just do it once a week. So here is what we have for the driver price changes. Fernando, Max, Sergio, Pierre, and Lance all went up after they had, Max and Sergio 1-2 in qualifying and in the race. So those guys, lots of points there. Fernando Alonso, great value for money. Pierre Gasly went up 0.1, which is going to hurt with what kind of moves I could have made for Saudi Arabia. And Lance Stroll also going up 0.1. On the other side, drivers that are going down in price, these are all the drivers that scored negative points. So we're still trying to figure out how F1 is going to change these prices throughout the season and see who goes, like why someone's going up, why someone's going down. If you score negative points on a weekend, are you just automatically going down in price? What is the reason for it going up? We're still trying to kind of hone in on that. But Ocon, Piastri, Leclerc, Norris all had pretty terrible weekends. Hulkenberg is a little surprising just because he's so cheap. Even though he scored -1 points, he was only 4.3 million in the game. So that's where it's kind of like, well, like he's such a good value. Why would he have to go down for scoring -1 points? Like, it didn't hurt you all that bad compared to Leclerc, who was at a huge chunk of your budget at 21.2 million, but now he's gone down to 21.1. On the constructor side as well, we have some price changes. Like I've kind of been hammering on here, Red Bull and Aston Martin are the constructors that you're going to want to get in your teams. With them going up, Aston Martin's great value for money. You're not going to get better than that. Those percentages are from Monday night, Tuesday morning when I took these screenshots. So those could be even higher now. It could be more dominant. And then the three teams that went down here, AlphaTauri, Alpine, and McLaren. AlphaTauri scored positive points, but went down. Like I said, we still don't know what's really going on in the game, as it is a new iteration of what we've been checking out over the past couple of seasons. Last year, it was with Play On, I believe, and now they are no longer in charge of the F1 fantasy game, the official F1 fantasy game. But that will do it for the Bahrain Grand Prix review. Time to look ahead to Saudi Arabia. So this is the third time that we'll be racing in Saudi Arabia. 50 laps, 27 corners, 3 DRS zones. It's one of the, if not the fastest street circuits on the calendar for F1. Max Verstappen won last year as his season started off with a DNF, and then he won here, and then he had another DNF in Australia. So it will be certainly interesting here. The last couple of years' results, there's only been 2 races here. So I put them both up just to see how it went. Obviously, 2021 qualifying was a different set of regulations. That was quite the entertaining qualifying in 2021. I believe that was when Max Verstappen went into the wall at the last corner as he was about to pit Lewis Hamilton for pole. But that set us up for that epic Abu Dhabi season finale there in 2021. But last year, it was Checo on pole. Didn't come through with the win, but Charles, Carlos, Max, and Esteban. And then it was Max Verstappen, Charles, Carlos, Sergio, and George Russell that rounded out the top 5 in the actual race. And I'm personally looking forward to this. It's going to be more data to get on Aston Martin. We'll see what all of these changes that Mercedes are touting, see if any of those are going to come through. That would be kind of early in the season. There's definitely some speculation about what's going to happen with Charles Leclerc with his energy store being, energy store. He might be on his 3rd of the season, so it could trigger a grid penalty. But I was seeing on Italian Motorsport that they may be able to salvage one of the 2 that they use, so he may not have to incur that penalty. So the preview will also include simulations moving forward, and these are from the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord. There's way more in-depth stuff here, so I would highly encourage everyone to go to that Discord, join it, get involved, and you will get way better info than I don't want to give it all away, obviously, because this belongs to them, but I just want to highlight how they are looking towards Saudi Arabia, and they will update their projections and simulations after FP1, 2, 3, and before qualifying. So that way we get a much more accurate see how the cars are running over there in Jeddah. But here are some simulations that they've put together. So the driver, most expected points here, Verstappen, not super surprising, but Leclerc at 36.8. I'm wondering if this will be because of the potential grid penalty that's coming up if he has to take one with the new parts on his car. He'll get overtake points, he'll get position gain points on Sunday's race as long as the Ferrari can make it all the way through the 50 laps on the street circuit. Most expected points per million, that's what the PPM stands for there, is Alonso. Not surprising there, as he has an excellent car, seems to be driving it very well, strong driver in a strong car. So an incredible value to start the 2023 fantasy season. Second most points expected per million is going to be Pierre Gasly as well. Like I said, that price change that he came up with was not favorable for the moves I could potentially make heading into Saudi Arabia, but I will forgive the Frenchman for performing so well and going up in price. And then over on the constructor side, not a lot to kind of break down there, as Red Bull, our most expected points was 79.3, Ferrari there as well, 59.1. And then again, most expected points per million, Aston Martin with their incredible value. And second most expected points per million is Red Bull. So even though Red Bull is the most expensive constructor, it looks like you're going to be getting the most points and potentially the second best bang for your buck if you have those in your teams. But like I said, please go to the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord. Those guys are really good over there, really good at explaining, breaking down what's going on all of these projections. And also what they do is this, which is fantastic. They kind of go through what a best team you can build at certain caps that we have. So no one has 104 million cap, but they do tell us what you could do with 104 million, 101 million, and 100 million. So I think the most you can probably be at right now is 106 or 7, but you wouldn't be able to like bank those with the 2 free subs that we have. So right now, the best team for 100 million that they're simulating going into Saudi Arabia with their early simulations are Leclerc with the DRS boost, Perez, Alonso, Gasly, Bottas, Red Bull, and Aston Martin. As you'll see here, all 3 best teams, no matter the cost cap, have Red Bull and Aston Martin on them. So like I was saying earlier, please get those in your team if you would like to do well this season. The best team for 101 million, that is one of the more interesting ones that also has Leclerc there with Perez, Alonso, Stroll, and Gasly. And then the most interesting thing, you probably can't see it because it's a little small on the screen. So once again, go to that Discord. You'll be able to see it a lot better than I'm showing it to you. But that best team that's 100 million cap is actually only like 98 million. So I think it all depends on if Leclerc is going to take that grid penalty or not. And we'll just have to keep our ear to the ground throughout the week, see what happens as the teams start to arrive in Saudi Arabia and all that fun stuff. A great resource will be F1 TV's weekend warm-up that will surely come out on Thursday night, Friday morning. So definitely keep an eye out for that as the week moves along. Moving over to my team here, looking at what options I have, I've got 3 options that I'm thinking of right now. This is all prefaced with the fact that you should just wait until the 3rd practice is over before you make any moves, especially without dynamic pricing this year in the game. These prices are locked in all the way until the race. So you don't really have to make any early moves. There's nothing to gain. So all you can do is just wait for more data and it will come along eventually. So my 3 options that I have in my head here are option A, as you can see on the screen here, is move Zhou Guanyu to someone cheaper than himself: De Vries, Sonoda, Hulkenberg, Sargent. Sargent was pretty impressive with all those overtakes and the positions gained. It helps that 3 drivers DNF, Lando Norris having 6 pit stops. So that certainly helped the American in his F1 debut. But it doesn't feel optimal to kind of get off of Joe. He had a good preseason. He topped the charts on day 2 of the preseason, coming in with the fastest lap. That's something to build on there as well. Alfa Romeo seemed to be moving in the right direction as a team. So I'm not sure if I would even move Joe, to be honest. Option B is kind of the same thing here. Move Lance Stroll potentially up to Valtteri Bottas and roll the second transfer. So in the game this year, you have 2 subs a week. And if you only use one of those 2 subs each week, you will get a third one the following week. You can't roll both of them and have 4. The max you can have each week is 3. So it's definitely a strategy to maybe, like with the meta kind of, I think I have maybe the meta team. Maybe Joe can be swapped out for Hulkenberg or someone like that. But pretty much Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Stroll, and then the 2 constructors are very template within the F1 fantasy community at the moment. But you could move Stroll to Bottas, roll that second transfer, and then you'd have 3 for the Australian Grand Prix at the end of the month. Option C is the most exciting if you want to just kind of throw caution to the wind, if you're already sick of the template and people just all having the same team. An interesting option would be to move Perez up to Leclerc. And according to the F1 Fantasy Tools simulations, that would give me an extra 8.3 points. And then I could move Stroll all the way down to Sonoda, which would take away about 6.6 points with a gain of 1.7 total points. Is that worth the risk with those Ferrari reliability issues? I do not know. I'd have to hear more. So like I said, just keep your ear to the ground, read f1.com, all those other websites. They will keep you in the right. Join the Fantasy Tools Discord, join the F1 Fantasy Tracker Discord. Those guys will keep you straight in regards to the F1 news. But those are kind of my 3 options that I'm thinking about right now. And yeah, just keeping my ear to the ground in regards to the news that's coming out. But that's going to do it for the first YouTube version of Backup Fantasy Sports. You can like and subscribe to the channel right below here. And also, if you're just listening on the podcast, you can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, Overcast, all those fun spots. But let me know what you liked and do not like in the comments below. And you can follow me on Twitter there. Yep, at you in or you out, and chirp at me, see what I'm thinking as the week goes ahead. Like I said, I'm on vacation next week, but I'll be on my phone. I will be. So anyways, I appreciate everyone watching. Thanks for listening. If you're on the podcast, thanks for watching on YouTube, and I will talk to you next time.